everybody. How you doing? Happy Moon Day to you. Hope you're doing well out there, taking care of yourself, taking care of each other. Hey Sierra, good to see you. I will say that I am feeling a little bit nervous about what I'm going to talk about today. And I think it has to do, well, it obviously has to do with the subject matter. There's a lot in this, and well, just to cut right to it, we're going to talk about Q Anon. Hey Gina, how are you? Good to see you. We're talking about Q Anon, conspiracy theories. This is a major theme circulating in the United States and around the world. I will say that, over here in Europe, it's the same thing, right? We live in this interconnected world where the news, where you get your news is determined by the algorithms more than your location as much as anything, right? So if you're of a particular bent, you're going to see this, you're going to be on the same sort of channel, right? So, yeah, one of the things that I'm feeling, well, I can describe it in that I have had both coffee and ice cream today. I put some ice cream in my coffee earlier, and so I feel this sort of, this simultaneous, this jittery, nervous, activated quality, and this slow, heavy, dense sense. And these are the feelings that come up when I get into these topics, when I start talking about conspiracy theories, start talking about the cabal and Q. It's both really agitating and aggravating and also really heavy. And yeah, that's balance. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Polly. Yeah. So yeah, I just want to name that right up front. And so as a reference point, you can see on my Instagram feed, I just posted a whole collection of images, most of the text of which was offered by Sean Korn as a sort of the wellness community standing up against Q. And Q, if you don't know, is this, God, what is it? It's this idea that someone in the Trump administration, if not Trump himself, is dropping these secret hints, these secret codes to 4chan or 8chan, and they are basically providing clues, little breadcrumbs for the Great Awakening and the sort of transformative moment in history that we're in. And the gist of it is that Trump is leading the way to defeat the global Satanist cabal and saving children from pedophiles and basically leading the way towards freedom, right? And so this is the narrative that's out there, and that's a pretty surface level summary of it. I would point you towards Conspirituality.net. They're doing a really nice job of collecting a whole bunch of information on it from a skeptic's perspective. If you want to know more, I do not want to be the one to introduce you to too many Q resources, really. So, good luck out there doing your own research, right? So, but just know that, there's a lot of information out there. I think there was an article in the New York Times, something about yogis against Q. So you can look that up. So this is sort of my contribution to that movement, because there's been this very troubling trend of holistic wellness influencers and people who are normally posting, follow your bliss and, meditate and connect with your truth and be kind, are now posting about saving the children, and which again, we're going to talk about this because this is complicated, right? And basically posting about pedophilia conspiracy theories, right? Which is a major swing from what they're normally talking about, and so there's this concern that this particular brand of conspiracy is taking over the wellness industry and leading people down a path that they may or may not want to go down. Okay, I took notes because again, like I have been playing in this realm for, oh, where did my note go now? Oh no. Oh, did it? That's very strange. My note just disappeared. That's a really interesting omen. Interesting. Wow, it totally just disappeared. Wow, recently deleted. There it is. Okay. Okay, hey. Okay, so I will say that my introduction to this whole space happened my sophomore year of high school, which was September 2001. And so the events of September 11th sort of shook so many people into this alternate awareness, right? The world will never be the same after that day. And for me, I immediately was like, the official narrative, the official story still seems like the biggest conspiracy theory of all time and super speculative and full of holes, and sort of watching the events that followed where it's like, oh, 2 days later they had this like 1,000-page document called the Patriot Act that was like, there's no way they wrote it in the interim between the events, and so they obviously had it ready to go, and the invasion of Afghanistan and then Iraq, and there's like this very clearly this like agenda that was just waiting for a moment like 9/11, and then there's all these so like the events of 9/11 were definitely the radicalization moment for me, where I started like, wait, maybe not everything is exactly as I've been told. And to this day, like, I would encourage you all to check out Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Really, really vast archive of valid data there to look at like what actually happened that day, what facts can we discern from what happened that day, and how is it distorted from the official narrative. Hey Sean, welcome, good to see you. So that 9/11 event was definitely this like radicalizing moment, and so at that point, my sophomore year of high school, I started watching. Did anybody else watch this YouTube video, Zeitgeist? This is such a like important moment in my life, honestly, where it was this really interesting combination of theological history and the history of money, and then like 9/11, right? So it was talking about how like the Jesus myth or whatever, right, was the same story told over and over again. And then they went into the history of money and how fiat currency is such a, wispy, imaginative thing. And then they went into 9/11, sort of pulled all these things together, and it's like, whoa, like your world is maybe not what you thought it was. So yeah, Zeitgeist, and then there was Loose Change, was another one. That was one of the sort of first most famous, like, hey, these pieces of 9/11 don't totally fit together, and here's the thousands of pounds of gold that went missing, and why did World Trade Center, why did Building 7 collapse, and all that stuff, right? So these were like very much, and then like, early Alex Jones was in the mix, and back then, like, he wasn't as crazy back then. I don't think. I mean, obviously he had the crazy in him always, but so these were, as a teenager, 16 years old, getting exposed to this information and being curious, because here's the thing, with something like 9/11, when the official narrative is so obviously bogus, it creates, for me, this stimulus to look for valid answers elsewhere. It's like, okay, if the people with authority are not going to tell me the truth, then I'm going to have to find it elsewhere. And so I go researching, go looking for whatever is out there. And so it doesn't take long to find a long list of actual conspiracies, right? These are not theories, these are conspiracy facts. And so I made a list like this, and this list is off the top of my head, in the last hour while I've been sort of prepping for this, right? So there's the Reichstag fire, which was a major catalyzing event for Hitler to take power, right? Where he's basically set his own parliament building on fire and the terrorists, and so we have to defend the homeland, right? Okay, Reichstag fire. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, which was a major catalyzing event to get the U.S. into war in Vietnam. One of the most horrific, unnecessary wars of all time. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people killed, and just awful, awful, awful. And it was all primarily motivated by this, or at least publicly justified by this fake thing that never happened in the Gulf of Tonkin, right? So there's that. In Chile in 1973, the first 9/11, the U.S. helped to orchestrate a bloody coup there of a democratically elected leader. And then looking at, all the previous decades in South and Central America, the U.S. CIA and is all implicated in so many coups, so much violence, so much interference in the politics of that region. And this is provable. There's this documented. These are not conspiracy theories, right? These are actors in our government and military conspiring together to influence the outcome of elections, or to overturn the outcome of elections, or to mess with the economics down there. One of the great resources on this is Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This is another really solid resource of how things work. And you don't actually need a conspiracy theory to explain how people in power seek to do whatever's necessary to maintain and increase that power. So that's all happening. That's very real, right? Don't need a crazy theory to explain it. It's factual and documentable. Okay, there's Iran in 1979, right? The Iranian Revolution, which, the U.S. played this crucial role in overthrowing what was, again, a democratically elected government, installing the Shah, U.S. screwing around. There was Iran-Contra. Anybody, I was not alive for this, but basically in the second term of the Reagan administration, they sold weapons to Iran, violating an arms embargo, and then used the profit to support violent insurrection in Nicaragua to overthrow a socialist government, to the Sandinistas there. It's okay, and then again, this is proven. We don't need a conspiracy theory about secret arms dealing and drug dealing and supporting armed militias in foreign countries. Everybody knows that this happened. There's MK Ultra, and this is the craziest one that was known and provable, right? This is mind control experiments in the military, and the scenes in Zoolander where he's getting brainwashed are sort of like a pop culture representation of what MK Ultra is all about. And there's tons of documented info about MK. Go Google MK Ultra, because that is a rabbit hole. Charles Manson, yeah, exactly right. He's in that mess as well. And so MK Ultra, at a certain point it was shut down, right? Congress was no, you can't be brainwashing people and doing these experiments. But if you are trying to tell me that our secret services and military were having success doing sort of remote viewing and really powerful tricks with brains, right? Well, there was a movie about this, Men Who Stare at Goats, right? I never saw the movie, but again, based on real events where people are having success using psychic powers for military applications. And if you're telling me that they stopped having an interest in that just because Congress said stop doing it, I don't believe that they stopped, basically, right? And it's from there that we have the phrase PSYOP, a psychological operation, and so this is where we suspect that there are experiments being done on the public. And we know that the CIA is deeply embedded in Hollywood. Again, there's tons and tons of people yeah, of course, the CIA consulted with us on this movie and suggested this plot line, and this again is all over. We don't need a conspiracy theory to validate that. And then a couple, big tobacco, right? For decades, manipulated scientific studies to sort of occlude the fact that tobacco was addictive and bad for us, right? And everybody knew on some level, but the public was kept blissfully ignorant until, it blew up, right? Same thing, there was a similar thing with big sugar, right? Where the sugar industry wanted to blame everything on fat, right? And so since the 80s, we started to have fat-free diets and fat-free and Diet Coke and all these sort of fat-free things because everybody thought fat was bad for you. And there's goes back to this particular study that they paid off one scientist to just flip some data, and this one study changed everybody's opinion for decades. And so again, I don't have the source for that, but I know that we can please Google it and find out what I'm talking about because it's a thing. Recently, there was the LIBOR scandal. LIBOR stands for London Interbank Offer Rate, and it's basically where the biggest banks in the world determine interest rates, and there's supposed to be this fair process by which they do it, but it turns out they were manipulating it for years and boosting their own profits, manipulating markets, and it's this huge scandal, right? So that and that blew up, and I'm not sure that anything actually changed. I don't know that anything is different now than it was then. That makes me think of what was that called? Just recently there was this huge drop of documents showing the extent to which the largest banks in the world are not doing their due diligence and allowing trillions of dollars of money laundering to be moved through them. God, I wish I could. All the cryptocurrency people have been talking about it because they're hey, everybody thinks crypto is for money launderers, but there's the percentage of the crookedness happening on crypto is minuscule because here's the thing, crypto is all tracked through the blockchain. You can trace it all back. You know exactly what happened. Whereas these bigger banks, there's just all the money in the world is being laundered through them. So okay, so that's the thing. And then the sort of most obvious one on some level is Edward Snowden and Julian Assange for WikiLeaks, for example, right? Where there's this direct opposition of, our leaders testifying in front of Congress saying, oh no, we don't spy on the American people, we would never do that. And then a week later, it's oh, these documents, oh wait, we've been doing that to an incredible degree, right? And so it's not, again, it's a conspiracy fact. We don't need to make a theory about it. So, okay, that's a really brief summary of what came to me off the top of my head of conspiracy facts. And I start with that as a jumping off point for compassion and understanding for those who have taken the red pill of the Q Anon track, right? And the fact is that this world is not what we're told, and there are people strongly incentivized to distort and hide what they're actually doing and the real power moves that are in play. And so it's in that environment that the more wild and baseless conspiracy theories can thrive. Because when there are these known conspiracies that are not prosecuted, are basically consequence-free as far as we can tell. Nothing major changes. These major revelations come through, and nothing changes. Nobody goes to jail. This is one of the things that is so horrifying in terms of the criminal justice system, is we see these incredibly punitive measures handed out for minor crimes, victimless crimes in so many ways, and then the biggest crimes on the planet are just oh yeah, don't worry about that, that's fine, that's just the way it is, right? And so you can see how people get frustrated. You can see how people are eager for some deeper level of truth, some other explanation for what's going on, because what is offered in the media is and through mainstream narratives is unsatisfactory, and I share that feeling. It speaks to the quote that's on the front of my Instagram post today, where Caitlin Johnstone is a wonderful journalist based out of Australia. I really respect her work. She says, QAnon is toxic because it takes these very valid concerns and, which is media, lying, corrupt politicians, and the fact that the elected officials aren't really in control, and twist these, and that we need a great awakening, right? That people do need to wake up, and a revolution is an appropriate response to what's happening on the planet right now. But it takes all those valid truths and twists them into support for Donald John Trump and the Republican Party, right? And so that is a really big leap in my mind, and so yeah, we'll keep going. So just to keep telling you my story a little bit. So I started looking into these things, and it is the same impulse that led me in this direction of 9/11 and all the conspiracies that led me into yoga and Ayurveda and Vedic astrology. And ultimately it comes down to this relationship with mystery and being eagerly in pursuit of the mystery and the relationship with the unseen and wanting to understand the unseen forces that are shaping my life and society around us and influencing all of our lives. So I feel a deep connection between, like, for me, in terms of motivation, right? The specific outcomes and the areas of inquiry are different, but the motivation from within it's this sincere seeking after the big capital W why, and how are we alive on this planet, and what does it all mean? How did we get here? Where are we going? Right? All these things are interwoven within my own heart and mind, and so that's again where we can see that the yoga and holistic wellness community are especially susceptible to the QAnon narrative, right? And it's about saving children, and it's about not wearing a mask because the mask is a sign of compliance and fear or whatever, and I have an immune system, so I don't need to wear a mask. And it's just such a it's so close and yet so distorted, right? It's like exactly right except exactly opposite, right? It's like so close and so wrong. So so I saw a thing the other day where it's like telling me that I'm okay, how did it go? I'm wearing a mask during a global pandemic. Telling me that I'm doing that because I'm afraid is like telling me I wear an oven mitt because I'm afraid of the oven, right? It's just like not quite the right thing, right? So yeah, and okay, so that relationship with the unseen, as the public, the world as a whole, is going through this COVID thing all together, right? In some ways, it is the largest unifying event in world history, where we're all connected, we're all in lockdown together. Like it's this thing that you can go anywhere in the world right now and talk to somebody, and everybody has a COVID story. And so with that, COVID, this virus is an invisible thing. And that's one of the sort of mysterious things about it, is we don't know. You can't just tell, like, oh yeah, that person is all red in the face, they must have it, right? That's not how it works. And so everybody on the planet is renegotiating their relationship with the invisible, with the unseen realms. And so the impetus for the stimulation for that is COVID. But it comes with this whole other slew, like what else is in the shadows? What else is unseen? What else is sort of in this imaginary realm that might be real, that might negatively impact me, that might be scary, and so that creates this opening for the conspiracy theories to rise, the sort of the imagination to run wild when, especially if people have not been practicing using their imagination, if they have not been building the discernment. And so we'll talk about discernment in a moment. But first, I want to name a person who I have been following for years, although like not, I stopped several years ago. But early in my sort of psycho-spiritual development, David Wilcock was such a profound influence on me. And I've read all his books, and I was signed up to get notifications every time he posted a new blog, and I watched all his videos, and he was like the authority in this space for me. And he was talking about everything from like sacred science, talking about sacred geometry and the structure of space and time, and he turned me on to amazing resources like John Martineau's Little Book of Coincidence. He turned me on to what's another example? Johannes Kepler. He turned me on to Dr. Robert J. Moon. He turned me on to all these amazing, like valid science, right? He's pointing to all these different scientific experiments and verified scientific truths that then point to this more magical reality. So that remains exciting to me. I remain grateful to him for that influence. But so he's talking about that. He's also talking about dream work and channeling, and how if you sort of orient your mind and body and breath, you can become a channel for higher intelligence and get this deep wisdom moving through you, and talk about writing down his dreams every single day, and that inspired me. I mean, to this day, I write down 2 or 3 or 5 dreams every morning, and they are a profound source of guidance for me, mostly just about the state of my psyche, but nonetheless, like, such valuable information. And so, again, like, really, really grateful for that. He's also talking about secret space program and the sort of secret cosmic history of the Earth and the civilization on Mars, and how the asteroid belt used to be a planet that got blown up in an ancient sort of Star Wars scenario, and talking about the bases on the moon, and all, like, this sort of, again, like, conspiracy, black budget, secret space program, how most of the UFOs in the sky are our ships. They're not actually UFOs. They're the Navy has them or whatever, right? Area 51 type stuff. So he's talking about that. And he's weaving all of that into this ascension narrative, that we are getting to this revolutionary point in world history, calling in the Mayan calendar, end of a 26,000 year cycle, and we are going to ascend if we, fill our hearts with love, basically, is the narrative. And man, is that captivating. That is a whole worldview, and with a directionality to it that spoke to my adolescent mind so thoroughly. And Wilcock introduced me to the hero's journey as a teenager, right? This Joseph Campbell's concept, right? So yeah, and so all of that. Let me see if I missed anything. Yeah. So all of that. He also was publishing articles about. He has this big epic long article about financial tyranny, basically describing the exact mechanisms by which the global cabal keeps control over the financial system and all the main businesses, and goes through all of that. And he touches on pedophilia and the satanic rituals that all of these politicians and leaders are sort of indoctrinated into, and it's both like an initiation and blackmail material, right? So it sort of locks them into the system, and they'll be supported as long as they toe the line. And that's why it never gets out, right? That's why there's never a big... at what point do journalists become imaginative storytellers, Sean? Right, exactly. This is a great question. Part of Wilcock's appeal, right? He's always talking about his insiders. He's vetted this insider, and this guy's got, cosmic top secret clearance, and so he's got this experience, and he's talking, and these stories are captivating and convincing if you are willing to sort of like blur your mind a little bit and let yourself go there. and imagine what's possible. Because if the world is not what you've been told it is, then, well, what is it? What might it be? What else is possible? And so one of the markers for me is that I was always hesitant to share his articles, his blogs. Like, I would read them voraciously and multiple times, but I would almost never share them on social media, like very rarely. I would never send them to my parents. I would almost never send them to my friends. You know, like I sort of was aware that this was fringe and full of holes, and sort of on some deep level embarrassed that I was so intrigued, and embarrassed that I was so bought into it. And I know that it definitely created some discord, right? Where it, you know, if I got too drunk or stoned or whatever, which I was doing a lot back then, it would inevitably slip out. And because I was absorbing so much of it and not talking about it, then I would loosen my tongue a little bit, and all of a sudden I'd be at a party talking about extraterrestrials and the secret cabal with people, right? And I'm sure, you know, maybe some of you who will watch this will remember that. And I mean, I don't know, I haven't changed that much. I still talk about all the weird stuff all the time, right? So I'm just who I am. But that quality of not being totally comfortable sharing it is this first sort of this, or looking back, it's this clue. It's ooh, I the whole time knew that there's something not quite right here. And that became more explicit when Wilcock started talking about Q. And Wilcock was where I first found out about Q, because he started quoting it, right? He would post whole articles just breaking down what Q said, and then linking it to, you know, some pop culture reference, some news article, and be like, look, this is that, and this is that, and when the newspaper says this, they're really talking about that, and this event is cover for this happening, and the whole, you know, in A Beautiful Mind, when Russell Crowe is out in the shed, right, and he's got all the papers and the Post-it notes connected in the shed, right, that whole thing. So the thing, and so for a while I'm okay, cool, here's this new insider that he trusts, that he's quoting, and you know, there are a bunch of predictions. He makes a bunch of predictions over and over again that don't come true. And there's always oh, well, you know, this didn't happen because the mission is ever changing, and we're trying to uproot thousands of years worth of this entrenched cabal that has their tentacles all through society, and so it's complex and it's ever shifting, and so just because this prediction was made and it didn't happen doesn't mean that it's not happening. Just wait for the next Q drop or whatever, right? And so on some level, for a long time, this started to become this blend between information and entertainment, right? Where I stopped taking it so seriously as the defining structure of my worldview, and okay, let's see what Wilcock has to say. Let's see what Benjamin Fulford is saying this week, because there's always, you know, something true in there, even if it's, you know, within a web of nonsense. And so it's just interesting just to see hey, what are these people saying? What's the narrative? And as that went on, I just completely lost interest, because there was this moment when basically support for Q, or to believe in Q, became tantamount to support for Trump. And basically the narrative, and as the narrative continues to be, that basically, Sean says, I really wanted the alliance to be rounding up all the bad guys for us behind the scenes, right? And so this is the narrative, is that, you know, Trump, as imperfect as a human he was able to fund his own presidential campaign so that he was not blackmailable. And so that would allow the alliance to get in there and drain the swamp, round up all the pedophiles, get rid of all the, you know, Hollywood elite, and sort of clear the slate and free humanity from the clutches of this satanic cabal. And this is the story. And so there was a moment where the cognitive dissonance was too strong, and it reminds me of this moment. At one point I was I was studying abroad, and part of the entertainment that they brought in for us was a hypnotist. And so we were all in this auditorium, and this hypnotist invites volunteers up on stage. I'm like, it's Friday night. I'm like, sure, I'll go get hypnotized. Sure, yeah, choose me. And so I go up there, and there's me and like 10 people. And I'm like going along with it and trying and just like letting it happen. And at a certain point, I'm like, this just isn't working. This is not a thing. Nothing. Like, this is stupid. And so I just like, in the middle of his spiel, I just like stood up and walked off stage. and the hypnotist was like, oh, you took yourself out of it. I'm like, yeah, no, I was never really in it. That didn't work. That wasn't working. And the whole show I basically like left at that point. It was like, what is this? And that feels like what happened with Wilcock and this whole sort of realm of thinking, where it was like I was like trying to go along with it for so long, and then at a certain point, like it started to get like weird and like require that I buy into the fact, like, and Wilcock is quoted as saying, like, so Trump is America's dad, right? And the way you got to think about it is with these and like started using Joseph Campbell's hero's journey to then pull in like the father archetype for Trump, and like all this is just like, dude, like, yeah, thanks, that is not my dad, no thank you. And sort of like just stepped away from it, and now to see it arising with such force throughout society, throughout the world, and to think that Donald John Trump, the man who is credibly accused of sexual assault, if not outright rape, the man who publicly fondles his daughter and talks about having sex with his daughter, the man who is famous for like hanging out backstage in the dressing room at the Miss Teen USA pageant, which he like bought and owns, and is also famous friends with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and it's like you're telling me that's the guy who's rounding up all the pedophiles? You're telling me the pathological adolescent teenager is the one that is going to fix all this for us? Like, yeah, right. And so this is where we need to like just keep in touch with reality, right? And observe actions, not narratives. And like, what is this person actually doing? And the fact is, he's a wannabe fascist dictator, and he's making that very, very clear right now. And there's no liberation narrative in Trump's America. He's trying to claim as much power as he possibly can while he thinks he can grab it. And he's, and we don't even need to go down the list, right? Separating families at the border, forced hysterectomies at the border, just like the racism, the xenophobia, the lack of care for humans. It's mind-boggling, the sort of obvious evil of this man. And that's where this whole Q thing is such a twist, right? It's such a sort of like funhouse mirror of reality, where it becomes this shadow game of the aspirational ascension. Oh, we're going to graduate into the next phase of from Homo sapien to Homo luminous, and yes, oh, we're ascending. Beautiful, yeah. I believe in that. That is a valid narrative. We are at this transformative time in human history, but that's not it. That is the distortion of it. That is the false path. It's so clearly a distortion, and it's terrifying and heartbreaking to me. Mostly it makes me sad that so many intelligent, well-meaning, otherwise positive individuals are getting so confused by the blitz of information, by the swarm of stories, by all the misinformation that is swirling around in the current culture. So yeah. Hydrate. Okay. So that's How's that? Is that okay? Yeah, you're welcome, Jolie. I hope this is helpful. It's been helpful for me to go through all this and sort of pull out the data points and summarize, like, because I've been in this world thinking about this stuff since for more than half my life at this point. And one of the things that I take from that is I think that over the years my discernment has evolved. Right, so I feel very capable to read through. I read the New York Times with discernment. It's like, oh, that's totally promoting this narrative and total BS, right? And same with Fox News, same with David Wilcock, same with, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. And if you have spent enough time sort of like this combination of trusting intellect and intuition, where it's like, ooh, okay, that's interesting. That's clearly designed to provoke an emotion. Let's do some more fact finding. And that narrative, that headline, hey, good to see you, Diker. We'll talk to you soon. Okay, let's follow up. Yeah. Okay, love you, buddy. That headline is distorting the reality, right? And you can sort of start to see through. But I think, again, for those of us who are just now dipping their toe into the realm of conspirituality, right? And like I have a recent friend who just recently got turned on to the idea that, sort of where I was getting turned on my sophomore year of high school with 9/11 is sort of like just now in his 30s been proposed to him, like, ooh, like maybe the world isn't what he thinks it is. And so it's this whole sort of onboarding process, and sort of you go through the phase, like, oh, is my pineal gland calcified? And what do you think about, David Icke? And sort of like going through these phases where, like, yeah, I read some David Icke and was into the lizard people for a while, but then at a certain point you sort of gauge what's the impact on my life? What actually has bearing in reality? Right? What makes me a better person and helps me interact with the people around me in a good way? What helps me contribute positively to the world? And what helps me understand the factual dynamics of what's happening in the world around me, right? And this sort of like stimulating fantasy is not that helpful. Over time, ultimately, it's not that helpful. It's much better to like, okay, let's cut through that. Let's get down to what's really, really real. Okay, so I wrote I have it underlined, what do I believe? And all I wrote is, it's complicated. And because it is, we live in a complex world, and it's not just like you can't say, oh, well, the New York Times is fake news. Well, some stuff they publish is fake, support for the Iraq War, for example. But some stuff they publish is vital, groundbreaking research. Trump's tax returns today, for example, right? So you can't just write it off one or the other. That's too simple. You can't, and say that goes with Fox News, that goes with your random blogger, your random YouTube video. There's always going to be this like grain of truth and this grain of bias, and in different proportions, different ratios, right? So constant discernment is necessary here. And like I said, like I definitely agree, we need this great awakening, but I would prefer not to wake up into the nightmare of a fascist state with white supremacists roaming the street with semi-automatic weapons, right? That's not what I want to wake up into, and that is ultimately the America that Q is promoting. And there's this very interesting correlation that I forget where I saw. Somebody else pointed this out, that basically the Q thing surged in popularity around the same time that the Black Lives Movement was surging in popularity. And so there's this suggestion that it's a reaction against, where, okay, Black Lives Matter movement, very like righteous anger, righteous cause, like we can see the violence, there's a whole history of slavery and oppression, and so there's this righteous rebellion happening, power to the people. And the suggestion is that the white folks who don't want to just come out and say, no, Black lives don't matter, but they feel threatened or like, put off and like, wait, I'm special and my life matters too, right? And so this QAnon, this sort of save the children narrative becomes a way for those folks to become the righteous warriors. Like, oh, well, we need to save the children from the pedophiles, and now I'm the one out in the street picketing with a sign and rebelling, and so it's this sort of like transference where I can't get on board with their movement because they're them and they're different from me, and I don't really believe in what they're doing anyway. But here's this other narrative that I can latch onto where I'm suddenly the righteous world-saving person. I think that's interesting. Whoa. Oh, what is happening with my notes here? Okay. The other piece, that I wanted to talk about is like, what do you do, right? Somebody, a friend from Omaha was talking about how this sort of ideological divide is tearing their family apart, and I think that's happening around the country, and I know has been happening with regard to politics for a while now. But this Q thing is, I think, an accelerator. It's a catalyst, taking it to a whole other level. And so the question is, what do you do with your friend, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, mother, father, like whoever is going down this rabbit hole? And I know that it is scary and it's confusing and sort of like don't know how to respond. And I know that because I put my parents in that situation. I definitely put friends in that situation where I was so convinced that, this narrative was the thing and the ETs are going to let, whatever it is. And what can they do? But I'm sort of impervious to facts or impervious to demonstrable reality, but it's all caught up in this other sort of secret narrative that only I'm in tune with. And if you don't believe it, you're just a sheeple, right? You're a sherpin. No, you're a sheep. And you just wear your mask and be compliant, right? Which is so funny because it's like, it's the people who are so against that are then sort of like implicitly or explicitly supporting this totalitarian momentum, which is, it's so backwards. It's so confusing. So a couple things. And again, for more on this, I would point you to Matthew Remski, who is one of the hosts of Conspirituality podcast. You can go to conspirituality.net. I think he is MatthewRemski.com, and he has been doing a whole bunch of research on cult dynamics, also known as high demand groups, and talking about and he talks about his own experience in cults, and nobody joins a cult, right? People delay leaving high demand groups, and so he's got a whole bunch of information and data and strategies, and his research has been really, really valuable to help me understand this and my own experiences. One of the things to do is to stay calm. And if you're in an interaction with this person, if somebody on Facebook is talking about it, whatever it is, just be calm, because one of the major driving forces of this narrative is the sort of emotional hysteria of it. They're kidnapping children for pedophilia and satanic sacrifice. And the whole point is get you all riled up and to bypass your rational brain. And so if you can stay calm and curious, keep asking questions. Keep asking them to explain what they believe. It's sort of like the best response to like a racist or a sexist joke these days is just like, what do you mean? Wait, I don't get it. Wait, can you tell me more? And of course I'm not doing a very good job of it right now because I'm like being obviously sarcastic, but calm, sincere curiosity as a mode of connection, right? As a way of staying with this person in reality and sincerely trying to understand what they're saying, what they're experiencing that leads them to think that, and sort of be the anchor in shared reality that they can refer to. And so this has multiple benefits because on one hand, it can allow them the opportunity to hear themselves say the ridiculous thing and just ask one more question, be like, wait, how does I don't understand, and just be honest, like, I don't understand how that works. Like, can you explain, like, oh, well, it's because Hillary Clinton's emails or whatever, right? It's like, what is that? I don't get it. Can you explain exactly? And then you sort of provoke, or you show them how little they actually know what they're talking about. And that may not change them in that moment, but over time, enough of those kind of conversations, and it's like, wait, what am I talking about? I watched that YouTube video and I was so convinced, but I can't actually repeat any of that information. I don't actually know, wait, what was that thing? And it sort of just like, it depletes the solidity of the structure of belief. The other thing it does is it by not abandoning them, it keeps them connected. And there's a great documentary about the flat Earth community. What is it called? Behind the Curve, I believe, is the name of this. And one of the sort of ultimate points of it is that the ideology, the sort of science behind the flat Earth community is secondary to the desire for community and connection. Ultimately this documentary becomes a story of people who have lost their wives, children, family, friends, everything, because they have gone down this path, and so the community is all they have left. So even if they're confronted with incontrovertible evidence that the world is in fact a sphere, then they can't really afford to believe that, because to believe that would be to lose their entire community of friends, their whole reference point for social belonging, which is literally a life or death function for humans, right? And so don't let your Q friends get to that point. Always make sure that they know that they have a reference point in you, and that they're safe with you, and that if they do go to a point where they're confused and they like, wait a minute, I don't know, like, what, this doesn't match up, this isn't making sense anymore, that they can come to you and you will be calm and sincerely curious and able to connect with them. My notes are just bouncing all over the place. There's one more thing I think I wanted to say. The last piece is, like, because I know that that's hard. Like, what I just suggested doing is difficult, not simple, not easy. Because when somebody is saying seemingly ridiculous, unprovable, unfalsifiable things that about, Satan and pedophilia and the Donald Trump as our enlightened savior, that is triggering for me. I tend to want to get upset and start yelling back, but that's not helpful. And so for me, it's putting hands on my body, staying connected to the fact that I am a natural being on an organic planet, an organic planet which is a living being who knows that I'm here and wants me here, and to just like slow down and be present with myself, remember the innate order of the universe, and sort of I find great strength and power in that, and peace, from which it's like, okay, I can spend the next 10 minutes or hour listening to this person in a gentle way, without giving any ground, right? Without letting them convince me, right? Or make them feel right at all, but to just to give space and sort of let them sort of disperse that energy, let them vomit it out, and then still be there with them and be like, okay, yeah. And can you explain it again, how these things connect? And so yeah, that's about what I came to say today. I hope that is, well, it sure is something, isn't it? I am wearing my Bernie Public Enemy shirt, Fight the Power, because, like I said, like, we are in this historic moment, this epochal moment, where I sincerely believe we are in the midst of a turning of the ages. Human society will never go back to being the way it was. We're in the birth canal. There's no going back. There's only forward, and we have to figure this out together. And so this sort of like groundedness on the planet, knowing who you are, knowing yourself as a divine child of the earth, and feeling the power and strength and solidity of that, as well as the peace and generosity of that. And so you don't have to, validate or support any of these, fascist leaning beliefs in order to be patient and loving with the people who are so confused and caught up in them. And I'm happy to talk to any of you individually about this, or if this is interesting, like just really scratching the surface here. And so if you want to talk more about this next week, happy to. Just send me a note. Thanks for everybody who has been here all hour. Good to see you, Sean. Good to see you, Jolie. Yeah, be in touch, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay. I'll hang out for a moment if you guys want to chat. Okay. Ascension, conspiracy theories, Ayurveda. Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Well, and I said it at the beginning, right? This awareness that the motivation to understand Ayurveda and astrology is very similar to what drives me. Hey Annie, good to see you. Thanks for being here. I hope that's helpful. I hope that's interesting. Hey, good to see you, Dyke. Are you still here? And so yeah, Jolie, just at the start, we were saying how like what leads me to want, it's the relationship with the invisible, right? The connection to the mystery and the I think the accurate intuition that there are invisible structures ordering life around us, right? That there are these unseen, like synchronicity happens, and like life is too weird to all be an accident. And I think they were talking about this in the most recent episode of Conspirituality, how the idea of synchronicity and the sort of like spiritual magic of that is the sort of the bright side, where the shadow side is conspiracy thinking, right? Where it's all connected, right? But it's nefarious, as opposed to like, oh, I'm a divine being in the perfect place at the right time, and there's 11:11 on the clock, and I just thought about this person, and then they called, right? That whole mode of being is sort of the other side of the coin of, oh my God, like, 9/11, the World Bank, and putting all those dots together, right? So these two things are not actually separable on some level. And so to link all that with Ayurveda and astrology is really interesting, because what is Ayurveda and astrology except the study of the invisible structures that are ordering the world around us, right? Can I see the moon's influence on me? No, but I sure can feel it, right? But am I just making that up? Am I imagining that? Is that just all in my head? Or am I really having an accurate intuition with that? So yeah, that's all really rich and again, unfalsifiable is this really interesting concept, right? Because you can't tell me what I'm feeling, right? You can't tell me what my experience is, and unfortunately, that very true fact gets conflated with what is a fact in the world. And I was having a difficult conversation with someone here the other day who was basically fighting back about the validity of the Black Lives Matter movement. And this person was born and raised in Portugal, has never been to the United States, and he kept saying, I feel like no black people in America are afraid to walk down the streets. I feel like, Lil Wayne told me that racism is all BS, right? And he kept saying, I feel and I think about sort of like about other people's experience and about sort of like statistically verifiable things, or you don't really get to have a feeling or an opinion about that, right? This is like, that's an objective reality that other people are living through. And so that all gets conflated, like, well, I really feel like Trump is a social justice warrior, he's a light worker. And like, yeah, I can show you some pretty verifiable facts that suggest otherwise, but yeah. Okay, the Instagram clock is telling me that we have 20 seconds left, and so I guess that's time to sign off. This is the Moon Day Boon, It won't be like this every week, but man, I'm sweating. So thanks for being here. VedaDave.com is the place to find more of whatever it is I do. Talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.